Don't miss this story of Jesus that was never meant to survive. Not a heresy invented by rebels, not a myth conjured by the desperate, but an ancient, carefully preserved tradition, carried in hidden texts, whispered through mystery schools, and buried beneath centuries of institutional silence, that describes a cosmic war so vast, so terrifying in its implications, that those who encountered it either devoted their entire lives to its understanding, or burned the scrolls and pretended they never existed. The burning happened more often. But some scrolls survived, and what they reveal about Jesus, about the nature of reality, about who actually rules this world, and why you feel, on certain quiet nights, that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong with existence. That is what we are here to explore tonight. To understand why this tradition was so dangerous, you have to begin not with the story of Jesus, but with the story of the cosmos itself. Before time, before matter, before the first particle of dust drifted through the first shaft of light, there was only the monad. The word itself comes from the Greek for unity, the one, the singular, a being, if being is even the right word, of pure, unbounded, ineffable light. Not light as we understand it, not photons bouncing through space, something closer to pure consciousness experiencing itself, infinite, silent, complete. The Gnostic texts, particularly those discovered at Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt in 1945, describe the monad as the true Father, the hidden God, a source so radiant, so total, that it cannot be approached directly, cannot be named without diminishing, cannot be contained within any theology or doctrine without distorting. From this silence, through a process the Gnostics called emanation, came the Aeons, divine beings of pure spiritual light, each one a facet of the monad's nature, wisdom, truth, life, logos. Together, they formed a luminous architecture called the pleroma, the fullness, the real heaven, if you need a human word for it. And here is where the wound enters the story. One of the Aeons, called Sophia, meaning wisdom, acted without the consent of her partner, without the balance that the pleroma required. She reached into the void beneath the fullness, moved by a yearning, a creative impulse that exceeded its proper boundary. And from that imperfect, unbalanced act, something was born, something less than divine, something fractured, something that believed it was God. His name, in the Gnostic tradition, is the Demiurge, the craftsman, the false creator. Known by many names, Yaldabaoth, Saklas, Samael, but always described with the same chilling characteristic, a being of immense creative power combined with profound ignorance. The Demiurge took the fractured light trapped in Sophia's act and built a world from it. He shaped matter. He carved time. He fashioned the 7 planetary spheres and filled them with his servants, the Archons, cosmic administrators, enforcers of a material reality designed not to liberate the spirit, but to contain it. And then, crucially, he looked out at his creation and declared something that should stop you cold if you have ever read the Old Testament. He said, "I am God, there is no other God beside me." The Gnostics heard that declaration not as divine authority, but as the confession of a deluded mind, a being so cut off from the true light that he did not even know a higher reality existed above him. His arrogance was not villainy in the dramatic sense. It was something more unsettling. It was ignorance wearing the costume of omnipotence. And into his world, into this material prison built from stolen light and ordered by blind law, human beings were placed, carrying within them, hidden beneath layers of flesh and forgetting, a spark, a fragment of the original pleroma, the divine seed that Sophia's longing had scattered into matter. This is why the Gnostics said that humanity is not fallen. Humanity is trapped. there is a difference that changes everything. Now consider what happens when a being of genuine divine origin, a messenger from the monad itself, enters this architecture. This is where the figure of Jesus becomes something almost incomprehensible in its implications. In the mainstream traditions, Jesus descends to save humanity from sin. In the Gnostic cosmology, Jesus descends to awaken humanity from ignorance, not moral failing, metaphysical sleep. He does not come to appease the God of this world. He comes, in some texts explicitly, in direct opposition to him. The Gospel of Judas, one of the most controversial texts to emerge in modern times, suggests that Jesus openly mocked the disciples when they prayed to the Creator God. He called that God something other than his Father. He spoke of a different source, a higher realm, a true God the disciples had not yet seen. In the Gospel of Philip, the spiritual relationship between Christ and Sophia is described in terms of reunion, the divine masculine and divine feminine, the Logos descending to meet the wisdom that had fractured the world, to heal the original wound from the inside. And in the Apocryphon of John, Jesus appears to the disciple after the resurrection, not as a resurrected body, but as a shape-shifting, luminous presence, who then delivers an entire cosmological map. The full architecture of the Demiurge, the Archons, the Pleroma, and the path of the soul back to the true light. He does not appear as a priest. He appears as a guide through enemy territory. Here is the question that this tradition forces us to confront, and it is one that commenters on this channel return to again and again. If the Archons are real, if there are forces, whether cosmic or psychological, that keep human consciousness confined, distracted, consuming, unconscious, what does that look like in a modern world? The Gnostics described the Archons as administrators of fate, beings who govern through law, through compulsion, through the repetitive cycles of birth and death and forgetting. They do not need to be dramatic. They do not need thunder and chains. They simply need to keep you busy, keep you identified with the body, with the social role, with the fear of death and the hunger for comfort. In this light, the message of Jesus as a Gnostic liberator becomes almost unbearably relevant. Not a message about believing the right doctrine, a message about waking up, recognizing the spark inside, understanding that the God demanding obedience and sacrifice and the suppression of inner knowing may not be the highest reality there is. Those who have always felt that the official story of religion, of history, of the self, contains enormous gaps will understand why this tradition has never fully disappeared. It cannot be burned away because it points to something that lives inside the seeker, not inside any institution. Now here is the tension that the Gnostic tradition introduces, and it is one that still divides scholars, mystics, and sincere spiritual seekers today. If the Demiurge created this world in ignorance rather than malice, what is our relationship to material existence? Do we reject the physical world as evil? Do we treat the body as a prison to be escaped? Some early Gnostic sects went exactly that direction. Radical asceticism, rejection of procreation, withdrawal from all material engagement. But other texts suggest something more nuanced. The divine spark is not contaminated by matter. It is merely hidden within it. And the work of gnosis, direct spiritual knowledge, is not to flee the world, but to see through it, to recognize the light inside the clay, to move through the architecture of the Demiurge without being governed by it. Jesus, in this reading, is not a savior who absorbs punishment on your behalf. He is a demonstration, a living proof that the divine spark can fully inhabit a material form, move freely through the archontic layers, and return to the pleroma intact. He is the map made flesh. What does it mean to you personally that there may be a version of the most central story in Western civilization that has been systematically suppressed suppressed for nearly 2,000 years? That is not a rhetorical question. It is worth sitting with. The emotional weight of this tradition, and this is the part that strikes people differently depending on where they are in their own inner journey, is not intellectual. It is deeply personal. Because the Gnostic myth is not really about cosmological diagrams and ancient names. Beneath all of it, it is about the experience of waking up in a world that feels wrong and not knowing why. About the persistent, aching sense that something essential has been lost, that the answers offered by the dominant culture do not reach deep enough, that you came from somewhere that this world cannot fully account for. That feeling, the Gnostics said, is not neurosis. It is not ingratitude. It is the spark recognizing its origin. It is the imprisoned light beginning to remember where it belongs. And the message of Jesus, stripped of the layers of institutional control and political theology that accumulated over centuries, may have been exactly that recognition offered as a gift. Not belief, not membership, not performance. Gnosis, direct inner knowing, the most radical gift a teacher can offer. The scrolls that survived the burnings are still being translated, still being argued over, still cracking open assumptions that theologians spent lifetimes constructing. The Nag Hammadi library alone contains enough material to reframe the entire spiritual history of the Western world, if taken seriously. We are living in a moment when that reframing is actually happening, not in institutions perhaps, but in individuals, in people who pull at threads and find that the threads do not stop. If you have followed this far, you are one of those people. There are those who scroll past questions like these, and there are those who cannot. If you are still here, you already know which one you are. Leave a comment below and tell me this. When you look at the world as it currently operates, the systems, the cycles, the distractions, do you see the architecture of the Demiurge? Or does that framework feel like mythology to you? Both answers are worth exploring. Neither is wrong. The conversation itself is part of the work. Subscribe if you want to continue this descent, because the next layer goes deeper. The Gnostics believed that above the Demiurge, above the 7 Archons, above every layer of cosmic administration, there waited a silence so complete, so total, so unutterably full of light that no human language has ever successfully touched it. They also believed that inside you, right now, there is something that already knows the way home, that something has always known. The question is whether you are ready to trust it.